Hey everyone, I'm going to read a little bit here. Read a chapter in Elvis and Kathy. Beautiful Saturday afternoon. The water, the trees, the sky. So the last chapter, Kathy gave us a good description on what it's like to travel on the road. How they fly. Sometimes they go straight to a bus to go straight to the venue, or they might go to the hotel and then get ready and then get on the bus and go to the hotel, and kind of food they eat, and the conditions, temperature and humidity, and traveling time zones and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty grueling. And we have to understand that in the early 70s, around 72, 73, Elvis's health is starting to go downhill a little bit. He's starting to have some of these problems that he's going to have the rest of his life are starting to show up. And a lot of them are hereditary, but just knowing that he's not really a healthy man traveling. They're not in bad condition yet, but it doesn't help and takes its toll on him. So, alrighty, so chapter 5. They see themselves in me, that's all. Elvis Presley. Elvis fans are wonderful. They are loyal, enthusiastic, considerate, and run the entire spectrum from young to middle-aged and the elderly. He appealed to men and women, probably because they relate to him. He was every man, a performer who came from poverty and never forgot his Southern manners and never tried to hide his background. In fact, he was proud of where he came from and what he had accomplished. The fans related to this and loved him. They bought over 2 billion of his records, went to his movies, good or bad, bought every available ticket for his concerts, and hundreds of thousands are still active Elvis fans even though a decade has passed since his last performance. Today, the fans are like my extended family, and we have all been through a lot together. In return for his fans' loyalty, Elvis loved them right back. He gave them his best regardless of the pain he was suffering or even during personal tragedies. He never turned down an autograph or a legitimate request, and always kept the cost of his concerts down so even the less fortunate could afford to attend. $10. There are millions of fans around the world who respected his personal wishes and loved his music. But when you deal with millions of people, you are going to have some who aren't as considerate as the majority. Most superstars have the same problem. The warmth of love the fans felt for Elvis also included the people who worked and performed with him. They always felt that anyone connected with Elvis also had some kind of special magic and greeted all of us with rousing enthusiasm. However, a few went overboard and were extreme in their determination to be near Elvis or be near someone who was near Elvis. I was a victim of these type fans more than once. I think there were several reasons why I was so often singled out by some of the more irrational fans. I sang duets with Elvis, and in later tours, I sang solos. And I am small and slight, which perhaps makes me appear more accessible and vulnerable. I was also introduced during every performance, not as part of a group, but as an individual, and my name stood out over many of the others. I don't think I've ever heard one of her solos from a concert, nor a duet with Elvis. I sure would have liked to have. I think this was brought home to me when I did that first show with Elvis in Las Vegas. Up to this time, when I had been on the road, the opera and the Sandpipers, there were fans, but they were not nearly as dedicated or determined. So I was not prepared for the radical change when I started working for Elvis. I became an instant celebrity because I was appearing on the same stage as their idol, and Elvis introduced me at every show, the little girl with the beautiful high voice, Kathy Westmoreland. The only other women in the show, the Sweet Inspirations, were introduced as a group and not by individual names. For instance, my mother tried to call me at the hotel where we were staying in Chicago, but couldn't get through. I was rather upset when I found out about it and naively called the hotel operator and complained. This is Kathy Westmoreland, and my mother tried to call me and they wouldn't put her through. The operator sounded disbelieving. Miss Westmoreland, I can't begin to count the number of people who have called today asking for you and saying they were your mother, your sister, or some kind of relative. You would never have had any rest if I had put those calls through. Wow. I hung up bewildered. Why would people want to talk to me? I was just a singer in the show, and my introduction had been rather casual. How could they even remember my name? It didn't take me long to find out that any name on the Elvis show was noted and documented forever in the memories of his loyal fans. Once in Fayetteville, North Carolina, yay, Fayetteville! After I had been on several Elvis tours, man, Daddy, we could have gone to one of those tours in Fayetteville. A girl called me to say that someone she overheard talking to one of her friends were wondering how much Elvis would pay to get me, Kathy, back if they kidnapped me. I thought it was just another strange call and told the girl, I know he wouldn't pay a dime to get me back. I wasn't upset by the call, but after thinking about it, decided to mention the telephone call to Dick Grobe, who was Elvis's chief of security at that time. I was smiling when I told him the story, as if it were some kind of sick joke. Dick didn't smile. He took the call seriously and said he wanted someone with me all the time. However, that night at the auditorium, the Sweet Inspirations were on stage doing their numbers, and I went back to the dressing room. Sometimes they would open for Elvis. The auditorium in Fayetteville was like a gymnasium, and the dressing rooms were located near an unlighted, dark area, isolated by stacks of bleachers in storage, and much farther away from the stage than most dressing rooms. It didn't even enter my mind to let anyone know I was going to the dressing room by myself. I walked in and started to undress and put on my costume when a filthy-looking man popped out from under a table. I can't remember much about his height or his face, except that he had real dirty, almost oily blonde hair. But I'll never forget his eyes. They were bleary and crazed looking. I started screaming, and then I ran as fast as I could down the hall, and the man was running after me. Creepy. Oh my gosh. I spotted a security guard, very old and stooped-shouldered. A man who should never have been a security guard. I tried to tell him what had happened, but all I could do was scream even more. He just looked bewildered. Others heard me and started running. They spotted the man who by now had run into a stack of stored bleachers and was hiding. They kept searching for him, but by then it was time for me to go on stage. Somehow I made it and finished the performance, but I can't tell you how badly shaken I was by that experience. They did find the man and arrested him, but I never knew what happened to him after that. I am not even sure that the girl's telephone call about kidnapping was related to the man in the dressing room. And if you want to know the truth, I didn't want to know. Wow, that is scary. Good old Fayetteville. I'm glad we didn't go. Not all of the experiences were that traumatic. Vernon, Elvis's father, met me in the elevator one time, and he told me there was a lady running up and down the hotel hallway calling, Kathy, Kathy, they're going to get you with the microwaves. What? When she spotted Vernon, she told him to be sure to warn me. They are going to get you with the microwaves. On another occasion, I walked into my room, and there was this man, woman, and 2 children waiting for me. The man was wearing a holstered gun. Kathy, at last you are back. And this woman, who I had never set eyes on in my life, Kathy, at last you are back, said this woman who I had never set eyes on in my life. Who are you? I asked. "Oh, we just wanted to see you and talk to you," she replied. "How did you get into my room?" A fair question under the circumstances. "We just told the clerk downstairs that I was your sister and you were expecting us," she answered in a voice that revealed her pride in her own resourcefulness. "Well, you can just leave," the bodyguard with me said angrily. "Well, you can just leave." I was more upset with the stupid clerk at the desk than I was with the family. Without too much fuss, my bodyguard got them out of the room and away from me. Then he went down to the hotel management and had a few choice words with them about security for all of us working in the show. Wow. Once in Chicago, Randy Cullors, who was a new drummer for one of the groups on the show, and I decided to go shopping. When we stepped outside the hotel, a bad dust storm greeted us. Two girls, who we found out later had been camping in the parking lot of the arena 4 days to get tickets, asked where we were going, and I told them we wanted to find the nearest shopping mall, but the dust storm made the trip unlikely. They offered to take us in their car, and we accepted. Ronnie and I shopped for a while, and the girls waited for us. Ronnie? Of course she said Randy. Ronnie and I shopped for a while, and the girls waited for us. When we had finished shopping, they were driving us back to the hotel when one of them said, "I would give anything to have a scarf from Elvis." At that time, as part of his act, Elvis would take a scarf he was wearing and wrap it around some fan's shoulders, and the crowd would go wild. The girls had probably seen the show and knew Elvis had given me one during the Hawaiian wedding song number. He also gave scarves away indiscriminately to the audience and always had dozens stashed away. Not knowing how it would affect the girls, I said, "Well, maybe I can get you a scarf." "You mean it?" one girl screeched, and then they both began to scream with such force they had to take deep breaths before letting out another scream. The car began weaving, and the girl driving was so excited she lost control, and we went right off the road. Randy jumped up, leaned over the seat, and grabbed the wheel, saving us from hitting the center divider of the highway. On top of the hair-raising ride, the driver got lost and could not find her way back to our hotel. It took us 1.5 hours before we made it back. I was late for the show bus. I nearly got us killed, and all I was trying to do was to repay the girls for giving us a ride to the shopping mall. Oh my gosh. And then she was late and missed the show bus. Oh my gosh. Another night, Myrna Smith of the Sweet Inspirations was in my room, and we were chatting and relaxing. But the hour was getting late, so Myrna said goodnight and left. A few seconds later, there was a light rap on my door and a soft voice whispering, "Kathy." I thought it was Myrna returning because she had forgotten to tell me something, so I went to the door and opened it without a thought. It wasn't Myrna. It was a woman dressed in leopard skin pants, ultra-high heels, with a wild haircut, looking just like Cher when she did that wild lady skit on television. Her hair looked as if it had been charged by electricity. She wore heavy makeup, and her lips were painted a bright red. She pounced into the room and caught me so off guard that she knocked me down. As I cried, "Kathy, I have to talk to you." I couldn't get my breath, and I was so frightened I couldn't scream. Out of nowhere came a security guard, and he pulled her off me and dragged her away. My gosh. "Kathy, I have to talk to you." What in the world? Oh my gosh. Then Jackie Kahane called to see if I was all right. It seems the leopard lady had knocked on his door by mistake and said she was looking for Kathy. Jackie shut his door and called security right away, and that's how they got there so soon. I have no idea what the woman wanted or where she came from or what she would have done if she hadn't made the mistake of knocking on Jackie's door first. Thank goodness she knocked on Jackie's door first. And he's like, calls up security, "Hey, this crazy wild woman is trying to find Kathy. You might want to head to her room." I never did get used to the crowds that gathered when we were trying to get from one place to another. People would grab at my clothing, all wanting a piece of something I was wearing. I've had people come up to me real friendly like, a smile on their face, asking to shake my hand. When I put my hand on theirs, they would try to pull a ring right off my finger. So Elvis taught me to wear tape under the rings so people couldn't pull them off as easily. But it hurts when someone is determined to get your ring off your finger, and if you resist, they don't give up, even if it means taking your finger with the ring. This, incidentally, has happened more frequently these past few years since Elvis's passing. Because they're like, I'm sure he gave you that ring. I want it. Of course, there were a lot of nice people, supportive and normal in their appreciation. They were thoughtful, gracious, and many gave me gifts. But the bad apples can really make you afraid and cautious. One night, I was in the lobby of a hotel near the elevators. A drunken couple was standing there when suddenly the man grabbed me and tried to haul me off to his room. The woman just stood there laughing, egging him on. He held on to me and I couldn't get free, and I became frightened because I knew this man was determined I was going to go with him. Luckily, Red West was just getting off the elevator and saw I was in trouble. He pulled the man off, and when I got to my room, I locked the door behind me. Just another close call. Maybe he was harmless, but I am grateful Red showed up so I didn't have to find out for certain. I've learned a few things over the years about protecting myself. I refuse to go into a hotel room without a man checking the room out first. I never stand behind a table signing autographs with my back against a wall. I have to have some means of escape because people in line keep inching closer and closer until they have you squashed against the wall. While with Elvis, I stopped going to public places in the hotel, like the coffee shop or dining room. There was simply no peace, no way to enjoy a meal because someone was constantly interrupting. They were either begging you to introduce them to Elvis or wanting to audition right there, or they wanted an autograph. Doing a show with Elvis meant room service or no food at all. Yes, she was saying, while with Elvis, I stopped going to public places in the hotel, like coffee shop or dining room. I remember people kneeling in front of me, crying and begging to touch my right hand, because on stage, Elvis had touched that hand as he introduced me. I totally reject idol worship. It is simply not acceptable to me in a religious or intellectual way. However, I understand these people because they loved Elvis so much that they just wanted to be near something that was near him. It gave me an odd feeling to have someone wanting to touch me because I had touched someone else first. One of the most annoying things that happened frequently was fire alarms going off in the hotels where we were staying. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, the fire alarm would go off, and at first, I would dash from my room like any normal person would do. But it was usually a false alarm. Some fans, believing they were being very clever, would set it off thinking Elvis would have to come out. They were probably surprised to find all the other hotel guests rushing to the exits, but nobody from the show. We were all jaded, and fire alarms meant another clever trick to us. After all, we were the same folks who survived an average of 4 bomb threats a day in Las Vegas and on the road. So a fire alarm didn't mean anything to them. Oh, gosh. However, I remember one night in Vegas, waiting in Elvis's suite, and the fire alarm began to ring, and I ignored it completely as usual. I waited and waited, but nobody else showed up in the suite. That's when I found out there had really been a fire on the 30th floor, the same floor I had been on. It's pretty high up. Yes, suites on the 30th floor or 31st floor. Some fans can be tireless and relentless. No matter how many times I told the telephone operator that I was resting and didn't want to be disturbed, the telephone would always ring because the operator had either ignored my request or perhaps there had been a change of shifts and a new operator was on. Or a fan with a very glib tongue and active imagination convinced the operator that their call was truly a matter of life and death. I actually had to fight the urge to pull the phone right out of the wall sometimes. I wasn't the only one who felt that way. One night, in total frustration, J.D. Sumner did pull his phone out of the wall, and he said it made him feel terrific. It's like, if that phone doesn't stop ringing, I'm going to pull it out. Oh, that makes me feel so good. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine the phone ringing and ringing and ringing, and it stops, and then it rings again, ringing and ringing? It'd be so annoying. Of course, in most big cities, Elvis had extra security besides his entourage of bodyguards. There were locals, many of them off-duty policemen, and were assigned to watch us and to control crowds. Most of them were wonderful and quick acting. However, some of them were worse than the people they were supposed to keep at bay. They wanted autographs and souvenirs. I know one security guard who was supposed to be guarding me took my silver belt while I was on stage. A lot of the security men would just stand around watching us get ready, or would find a good vantage point and see the show, completely disinterested in what was happening in the audience or backstage. Many times, Elvis's bodyguards were just enough to handle the crowds, but the security people that were hired to help them did not make me feel any more confident and secure than I would have if the proverbial fox was guarding the hen house. They weren't doing their job, were they? They were just watching the show for free and probably getting paid a little bit. Between tours, the one refuge I had was my home located in a rural Southern California area. It was a refuge until Elvis made the mistake of introducing our own little Kathy Westmoreland, the little girl with the big voice from my hometown, California. I don't know, she didn't put it in, but he would say from, Calcutta, California, or whatever. From that moment on, and until this very day, my refuge became the scene of some bizarre happenings, some of them hard to believe. One early morning, a woman appeared at my home. I was in Vegas working my first 2 weeks with Elvis, so the very first 2 weeks in 1970. But my mother and father were there, probably taking care of the animals. Now, I want to point out that my home is in an area where I can have horses and other animals, which I love. It is off the beaten path, and people do not get there by accident. When the woman came to the door at 7:30 a.m., my father answered and she asked for me. "Do you have stable space for rent?" My father said we didn't, but the woman seemed pleasant enough, and you must remember that my parents at this time were not aware, nor was I, that some fans can be very pushy. The middle-aged woman looked ordinary enough, maybe a little flashy, but quite pleasant. "I'm sorry I missed Kathy," said the woman. "I'm a good friend of hers." My parents said they were sorry too. And before they knew it, they were engaged in a conversation about me and about the Elvis show. She had just left Las Vegas, she told them, and the show was wonderful. And I had a wonderful voice and was such a nice person. On and on she went. She asked if she could come in, and since she was obviously someone I knew, they thought, they agreed. She kept talking and talking, peering here and there, trying to see everything. "Where does Elvis sleep?" "Well, Elvis doesn't sleep here. He has never been here," replied my sweet, hospitable mother, who by now wondered who the woman was, because any friend of mine would have known that Elvis didn't visit my home in California and never had. She's like, "Well, Elvis doesn't sleep here. He's never been here." Finally, after an interminable length of time, the woman left, got in her car, and drove away. That afternoon, all the electricity went off. After trying fuse boxes and the obvious things, my father gave up and started calling the utility companies. "Something strange here," he said. "All my lights went off. There is no electricity and no reason why it should be off. Is there trouble in the line?" "No," the light company said. "Has the bill been paid?" "Of course the bill has been paid," my father said with growing irritation. The light company checked and came back to the phone. "Well, according to our records, a Mrs. Peterson came in this morning, said you were moving and wanted all the utilities, gas, water, electricity, changed into her name." "We aren't moving. There is some mistake," protested my father. At first, both my parents were shocked. Who would do such a thing? The clerk left the phone and came back. "Our clerk who handled the order said a woman came in, said she was moving in at your address," he said. "Turn the power back on. That's not true," said my puzzled father. After further investigation, the woman who had professed to be my friend and was so pushy was the same one who had the utilities turned off. My poor father, new to the world of off the deep end, quote unquote, Elvis fanatics, called me in Las Vegas outraged. "How stupid of you to send this friend of yours to our home. What kind of wacko friends do you have anyway?" Of course, I had no idea who this person was. She had to be living some kind of fantasy, believing she was moving in with my family and myself. It turned out that she had seen the show in Vegas, had heard Elvis say where I lived, found the house, and talked her way in. At first, it was hard for me to believe that anyone would go to such great extremes, but later I learned that this type of thing is very common. Golly. And she's not even Elvis. Several years later, this same woman, my father believes it was the same woman and my mother isn't certain, showed up at my home once again. She was wearing flashy dice earrings. They must have contained batteries. And my parents, for some reason, let her in, or she may have pushed her way into the living room. My parents still haven't learned how to be rude. Anyway, I was in my bedroom ready to go to sleep when I heard her talking, and, nightgown and all, I climbed out the window, waded through the duck pond, and headed for my neighbor's house. Nancy, my next-door neighbor, wasn't home, so I headed further down the street. I knocked on their door, barefoot and in night clothes, but I didn't care. I had to escape. "May I just stay here for a moment?" They said I could, and I sat in their living room, trembling with anger and emotion. I began to cry, and they comforted me. It was all just too much, hounding me at the only refuge left to me, the privacy of my own home. Finally, the woman left, and I went home, angry and resentful and ready to explode in my frustration. I vowed the next time that crazy lady got near me, I was going to call the police. And the police were no strangers to our house because of threats and unwelcome people trying to get into our house. I was so emotionally on edge that I probably needed professional therapy at that point. Gosh. One man kept calling me. He would call me from all sorts of places. He was a salesman and was on the road a lot, but no matter where I was, he would call. Another man was frequently in the audience, and he also watched me silently off stage in many different cities. He would be standing in a corner of the hotel lobby, at hotel doors, in crowds of fans. He never said a word, but I knew he was there. Creep out. Creep, creep, creep. Every time you look around, it's like, oh my God, there's that man again. I'd be like, Red, Sonny, y'all stay right beside me. Myrna noticed his vigil and often alerted me. There he is again, Kathy. Then one day he called my home and said to my father, "Tell Kathy to come and pick me up at the airport." This man was a total stranger, had never said a word to me in person, just spoke to me on the phone, and now he wanted me to pick him up at the airport. He showed up at my house and my father called the police and went to the door with a baseball bat. He chased the man away and the police arrived. I have no idea if he was dangerous or just on some kind of fantasy trip. So hopefully he never came back. There was one man who called every time there was a full moon. He would call in the middle of the night, sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning, and asked, "Is Elvis there?" Once in Vegas, a group from Van Nuys came to see the show. Van Nuys is a 2-hour drive to my home, and there was an acquaintance of mine who knew a man in the group. So she introduced us. It was all very casual, and I forgot about it. Months later, a man kept driving past my house, and he looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. He kept going back and forth, and exasperated, I went to talk to him. It was an impulsive and foolish act, but I wanted to find out who he was. It was then I noticed a number of handguns, rifles, and ammunition laying in the front seat of his car. I ran inside and called the police. I told them this man had an arsenal in his car. It turned out he was the man who had met me in Vegas and had decided he was going to protect Kathy, quote unquote, a self-appointed vigilante. Later I learned he had gone berserk and shot his wife. He went to prison, but I think he is out now and still living in Southern California. I don't know any more than that, but obviously the man was emotionally unbalanced at the time. Golly, I'd be afraid. I'd want to move. At one point, I was flying on commercial airlines from Los Angeles to Graceland in Memphis. I kept noticing this one lady who was on every plane I was on. Later, I heard from some of the band members that she had told them she was after me and wanted to have a lesbian relationship with me. Again, that's creepy. "Kathy Lou, she wants you," they joked. I had to take some embarrassing kidding, as you can imagine, from the boys in the band. Oh my gosh, I'd be like, I'm going to put y'all on him. I'm going to put her on y'all. I have no idea how she would have known what flights I would be on, but she did. And then she just stopped appearing wherever I looked, and one of my friends teased me, saying she obviously had fallen in love with someone else. Yeah, I wonder if she worked for the airline. How would she know? How could she find out? She was on every flight. That cost some money. Just recently, a woman called and said she looked a lot like Priscilla and wanted to meet Kathy. My mother said, "Kathy doesn't live here anymore." The girl said she knew I did, that she wasn't like all the others, and she just wanted to talk to me for a few minutes. Most of them believe they are just like the others, but believe they aren't just like the others, but they are. Why would it matter? She looks just like Priscilla. She calls her up, "Hey, I look like Priscilla and I want to talk to Kathy." Another person who even today calls regularly says the same. "I'm not like all the others. I just like the man, Elvis, and I want to talk about the man." I had to call the police more times than I want to remember, and I can never thank them enough for all their understanding and patience. They used to patrol down my street every hour because people would go through my mailbox, steal my mail, and try to steal my car. Someone even wanted to steal the seats from my car. One woman wanted to beat me up because her boyfriend had a crush on me, and I didn't even know who he was. Oh my gosh. It's crazy. Since Elvis's death, I've often traveled around the country at the request of Elvis Presley fan clubs. On one occasion, I was asked by a fan club in Hickory, North Carolina, to sign autographs in a car lot for 3 days as part of a charitable fundraiser. Many of the fan clubs are involved in community charities. Wayne Taylor, the husband of the original Kathy Westmoreland fan club, Wayne Taylor, the husband of the original Kathy Westmoreland fan club president, located in my hometown, was with me most of the time. During one of the 3 days, I sensed something was wrong because many of the people in charge seemed strange, nervous, and they wouldn't let me come out from behind the table where I was signing autographs. They moved my table so that it was located far back in the showroom corner. I knew something was up, but I didn't know what. I found out later a man had called and said, "Kathy Westmoreland will be sorry. By the end of this day, she will be dead." They didn't tell me until later. A man was arrested and he was carrying a gun. Wayne noticed the guy on the fringe of a crowd acting differently from the rest of the people. Wayne knew to look for those who were acting differently than the others. Whether this was the same man who had called is another question. Wow. By the end of the day. There was a time in Las Vegas also in which a man called my room and said, "Kathy, this is John Roberts over at the Hilton. Tell your boss tonight I'm going to blow his brains out." People who make these kinds of calls usually don't follow through with their threats, but there are some who do, and you never know which one it will be. "Hey, Kathy, tell your boss." Wow. Another time, I got the nicest letter saying, "It was so great of you to stay in the parking lot for 6 hours signing autographs, and we wanted to thank you for being so kind." The letter was from Baltimore, Maryland. Well, I hadn't been in Baltimore during that time. I was in New York. Somebody stood outside in that parking lot signing autographs for 6 hours, but that somebody sure wasn't me. Now I knew there was at least one Kathy Westmoreland imitator out there somewhere. Oh my gosh. Can you imitate Kathy Westmoreland and sign autographs for 6 hours? As I am writing this, I am finding out that there is more than one Kathy Westmoreland imitator. I received a telephone call from a friend who told me about an incident in a Duarte nightclub just the other night. Duarte is a small town not too far from where I live. And 2 women visited one of the nightclubs there, and one introduced herself as Kathy Westmoreland's manager. The management and the musicians were delighted to see her because, lo and behold, the manager had Kathy Westmoreland with her. So a Kathy and a manager impersonator. During the band's performance, they stopped and introduced someone I know you will all be anxious to meet, the woman who sang for so many years with Elvis Presley, Kathy Westmoreland. The woman stood up and received a long standing ovation from the audience. "Sing for us," the audience begged. This woman, who I was told weighed in at 185 pounds or more, shook her head slyly as she blew kisses to her appreciative audience. "I'm so sorry I cannot sing for you. Unfortunately, I was in a terrible automobile accident and my vocal cords were cut." The audience groaned in sympathy, and the heavyweight Kathy Westmoreland sat down, and groups clustered around. And the heavyweight Kathy Westmoreland sat down, and groups clustered around her table for autographs, which she signed willingly. You don't look the same as you did when I heard you sing at a country western club recently. That Kathy Westmoreland was much smaller," said one suspicious fan. "Where was that?" asked the imitator. The fan named the club. The imitator then turned to her manager and said, "That little twerp is imitating me again." Now, I have to add that I might be a little twerp because I am 5 feet 1.5 inches, and if my weight ever got up to 185, I would surely be dead. I am very slight and short. This woman was huge. So then she said that the real Kathy Westmoreland was imitating her. Kathy is the same size as me. There are 2 sad things about this incident. One of the musicians at the club received a promise from the phony Kathy Westmoreland that she would help him with his music at a recording studio. The musician was thrilled, I understand. Well, It is obvious that he will never receive any help from her. Well, she told him that her voice cords were cut. Secondly, those who saw the incident tell me that they think the manager truly believes she is handling the real Kathy Westmoreland, which she most certainly is not. Aww. It is most annoying, but I must now get my attorney to find this imposter. Warn her not to do it again, or I will turn her over to the police. But that isn't what bothers me most. I keep wondering what she is saying and doing while she is using my name. A pathological liar like this woman could be capable of saying or doing anything, including spreading lies about Elvis. But my problems are small compared to the number of look-alike imitators that Elvis had. They will go to strange towns and be Elvis, doing things that Elvis would never have done. He had a long list of imitators, and they are difficult to stop. By the time you have heard about them, they have moved on to another place or another town. They are slippery and destructive. I only wish I knew why they do it. Perhaps they have a powerful drive for attention, but they haven't the talent to go with the attention after they get it. So they usually find an excuse not to perform, or it will blow their cover. Impersonating celebrities is as old as time itself, but if you are the one being imitated, it is most uncomfortable being part of a very sick joke. Yeah, I can see that. After Elvis's death, many Elvis impersonators came on the scene and have actually established a following, difficult as that is to believe, which reminds me that in 1973, I started having a recurring dream. In my dream, I was backing up a man pretending to be Elvis. Colonel Park was standing off of stage left. I was trying to scream to the audience, "This isn't Elvis. This is not the real Elvis. This is a pretender." The colonel was furious because he wanted everyone to believe this was the real Elvis. In fact, to my knowledge, the colonel had never had anything to do with Elvis imitators. But it was a particularly vivid dream, and the ironic thing is, at the time, I had no idea that Elvis imitators even existed. It was a prophetic dream, and I wasn't even aware of it. In the entertainment industry, stars are vulnerable to many schemes by unscrupulous people. One of the most common is a mother trying to arrange a meeting for her daughter with a famous male personality. Supposedly, this is for the purpose of inspiring the young lady and offering encouragement to continue pursuing a show business career. The mother and daughter loiter in the hotel lobbies and try everything to get backstage and generally hound anyone they feel could get them to the star. Elvis was always aware of this kind of setup and never had a problem, but he told me how the mothers would offer their underage daughters, who are usually dressed and groomed to look older, to a headliner, and if any kind of involvement takes place, the unsuspecting performer is usually hit with a lawsuit because he took advantage of a minor. In addition, there are always groupies waiting for one-night stands and an occasional nymphomaniac who sometimes entertains scores of men in a hotel room while her husband and children wait patiently in the lobby for her to return. On stage, Elvis was in his element, but sometimes it was too much for even him. One night, his legs and hands shaking deliberately, I heard him say to Vernon, "Daddy, it takes a lot of nerve to go out there." He's shaking his hands and legs, just trying to get the nervousness out. And most times it did. Imagine facing thousands and thousands of screaming fans who expected you to deliver your very best, but in front of you were bodyguards, sometimes special police officers, holding machine guns and billy clubs with the specter of a death threat looming over your head. At any moment, someone could pull a gun out and end the singing, the caring, the loving you were giving to every being out there in the audience. Imagine being just one gunshot away from oblivion. many, many times, and still performing as if you hadn't a care in the world. God, that's got to be so hard. And it's like he would tell people, I don't know why they want to kill me. Why they want to kill me. Why they want to hurt me. I haven't done anything to them. I'm a nice guy. In Chicago, a man phoned and said he was going to shoot Elvis. We were told to hit the floor if we heard a shot or if anyone made a move. Vernon was real nervous that day, pacing back and forth, the strain showing on his face. In the middle of the performance, the guy who had made the call lit an M80 firecracker and started to throw it at Elvis. God. Red West saw him and jumped him in time, so the firecracker exploded in the guy's hand while Red clobbered him. When it happened, Elvis stopped the show, grabbed his chest, and cried, "Oh my God, I've been shot. Oh my God, I've been shot." Vernon jumped up on the stage crying, "Elvis, Elvis!" He was certain his son was dying. Then Elvis grinned up at him and burst out laughing. We were all, needless to say, relieved, but we were shook up about it for days. How in the world can Elvis make a joke with that? I'm surprised it didn't give his daddy a heart attack. Wow. Elvis. He's just trying to lighten up the thing, knowing the guy was done. I've been shot. The examples written here were extreme cases, and fortunately not representative of the majority of Elvis's fans. His true fans are good people who transmuted all the distortions and malignment from his critics into a his true fans are good people who transmuted all the distortions and malignment from his critics into a positive force for the betterment of this world. These are splintered groups of people from over the globe, not centrally organized, which makes their accomplishments all the more astounding. Together, they somehow picked up the message from Elvis to help your fellow man. To those who want to criticize their abnormal zeal, may I remind you, by their fruits shall ye know them. I ask you to look at the best off the vine, not the one bad apple. For instance, in the last 10 years, Elvis fans, in his memory, have raised well over $500,000 for various charities. Memphis-based organizations have seen firsthand the love and devotion of Elvis fans. As of January 8, 1987, the Le Bonheur Children's Medical Center in Memphis has received more than $50,000 from Elvis fans. One of the clubs who focuses on Memphis-based activities is the Elvis Presley Burning Love Fan Club of Streamwood, Illinois, who raised $6,000 in 1986, sending $3,000 to Le Bonheur and $3,000 to the Elvis Presley Memorial Trauma Center. On January 8, 1987, in Memphis, Dr. Tim Fabian, the medical director of the Elvis Presley Memorial Trauma Center, said that over the last 3 years, Elvis fans have contributed $100,000 towards the trauma center and the legacy of Elvis Presley. I'm overwhelmed to think of individuals laboriously collecting Campbell's soup can labels and used postage stamps to aid organizations working in the fields of arthritis research, muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, battered women and children, and homeless animals. Elvis Presley fans are a living memorial to the spirit and love of Elvis. The $1 donation from a fan who can ill afford that amount is as much an example of the depth of admiration and respect for Elvis and his humanitarianism as the largest amounts. It's like the poor lady who put her only 2 pennies in the Bible. That story. The $1 donation from a fan who can ill afford that amount is as much an example of the depth of admiration and respect for Elvis and his humanitarianism as the largest amounts. Each and every act of charity represents the best of Elvis. Documentation for fan club's charity contribution is courtesy of Fran Roberts, president of Elvis in Canada. All right, I am going to stop there because this goes on to page 154, and we're only at 138. And I think she's going to go to a different type of, different subject. Maybe, maybe not. But anyway, this is a good stopping point because it sounds like she stopped with those crazy people. But anyway, how about that? Is that not crazy? Wow, that is so crazy. People calling her house and coming to her house and following her around on airplanes and showing up at shows. And then all the people that are, calling with threats. That's just crazy. I mean, that enough in the 7 years, the number that she mentioned in the 7 years of touring with Elvis, which is not 365 days a year. It's some two week, maybe 3 week tours in Las Vegas in the spring and in the fall, and then some 2 and 3 week tours around the country. Maybe, I know he'd do them in June. Sometimes he might do them in January. He probably did 4 tours a year. 4 tours a year, and then the Las Vegas ones. And then he started doing some in Lake Tahoe, too. He did some residencies in Lake Tahoe. But that's just... She was on the road a lot, I guess, when you start adding up the days. I could add them all up, 3 weeks here, plus 3 weeks here, plus 3 weeks here, plus 3 weeks here, plus 3 weeks here, Anyway, what we just read was way more than should have ever happened in the first place. They're just crazy people. Look at this. A hummingbird. Off it goes. That's so cool. All right, you guys, I'll see you next reading. Bye.